Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Andrea Tecpoyotl Tepale, and today we are here to present to you about the naturalization process. So let's begin. First and foremost, want to just introduce our organization and the work that we do. So Alliance San Diego is a community empowerment organization that builds coalition to promote social justice and social change. Our mission is to be able to empower diverse people and organizations to engage more effectively in the civic process. And our promise is that we're able to achieve a greater impact on issues that matter to all of us by building coalitions and mobilizing our resources. And so today, the presentation is brought to you by our Legal Rights Department, and our Legal Rights Department includes our Director and Counsel, Michelle Solari, our Manager, Hector Oviedo, and he's a Department of Justice fully accredited representative. Myself, Andrea Tecpoyotl Tepale. I'm an organizer, and I'm also a Department of Justice accredited rep, partially accredited. And then our other organizer, Yolanda, and she's also working on her accreditation. Some of the legal services that we provide include consultations, providing our community with the naturalization process, helping them in that process, doing DACA renewals and consultations around DACA, supporting the community with their green card renewals, and more. And then the other side of our work is doing things like this, such as webinars and presentations around naturalization, immigration updates, and know your rights. And so today we're here to talk about these topics. So first and foremost, what do you need to be eligible for the naturalization process? What are some of those extensions? What are some of the benefits of becoming a U.S. citizen? And how do we avoid fraud? So let's first get started with what are some of the eligibility requirements that we need in order to be able to apply for the naturalization process. And so I'm just going to give like a brief rundown of all of them, and then we'll go into depth into each and every single one of them. And so here are the basics. You need to be at least 18 years of age. You need to be a lawful permanent resident for at least 5 years or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. You need to be living in the jurisdiction for at least 3 months when you're filing your naturalization application. You'll need to have the continuous residence and physical presence in the U.S. for 5 years or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. Additionally, some of the other eligibility requirements include being a person of good moral character, being able to pass the English and civic exams, and be able to promise your loyalty to the U.S. and the Constitution. So let's go into a little bit more depth into each and every single one of these. So one of the first requirements is to be a lawful permanent resident. And so this means that basically you must have been a lawful permanent resident for at least 5 years or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. And under that requirement, you need to have been living together those full 3 years. And the spouse needs to have been a citizen, right, during all of these 3 years. Another part of the application is, be able to live in the jurisdiction from where you're applying to for this process. So in this requirement, the applicant must live at least 3 months within the jurisdiction or state that they're applying for naturalization. And a small exception to this is students, right? We have a lot of college students that want to apply for the process, or students in general, right, that may not be living with their parents and don't have the same jurisdiction. So a student who is over 18 can apply under the jurisdiction of their school. And so only if the student is dependent on their parents, then they should be using the jurisdiction into which their parents live. But otherwise, they could use their school jurisdiction. And so now we get to the part of explaining the continuous residence versus what the physical presence in the United States is, right? So the continuous resident requirement means that you must have maintained a general residence within the United States for 5 years, or 3 years in the case of of having a U.S. citizen spouse. And then for the physical presence requirement, the physical presence is the current time that the applicant has been present in the US before actually submitting their application. Okay, so there's that distinction there. And so what does it mean for someone to be a person of a good moral character? Let me just... Okay. So here are some of the examples that show someone that is lacking good moral character according to USCIS. So a person is not of good moral character if they're violating the law on controlled substances, giving false testimony to obtain their immigration benefits. A great example of this is have lied in your application to become a legal permanent resident. After a conviction, be in jail in the aggregate period of 180 days or more, failing to pay child support or alimony, not having registered with the U.S. Elective Service, and this usually just applies to our men, failure to pay your taxes. So, right, if you're not paying your taxes, that's also lacking good moral character. And then having conviction for welfare fraud is something else that immigration sees as a person, right, is lacking that good moral character. But what happens if you have a criminal record, right? So if you have a criminal record, if you've been arrested, fined, detained, you need to make sure that you obtain the documentation before you proceed with the request for naturalization. So it's really important to have all of that information before, sometimes before you do a consultation to see if you actually qualify for it. So if you or one of your immediate family members have a pending arrest or warrant or deportation order, you always want to make sure that you report this to your lawyer, right? The truth is that immigration already has all of your information. And so all you're doing is being honest with the person completing your naturalization application, whether it's an attorney or a Department of Justice accredited rep, so that we know how to best inform you and we know how to best guide you through the process without putting your status at risk. And so if you have a criminal record, before applying to the naturalization, these are some of the following things that you could obtain right before actually doing the process. So a copy of your arrest report, a certified copy of your court decision, any sentencing documents, documentations of the results of any traffic incident, for example, DUIs, any other document that is relevant to what happened in the case. And then tickets that may have not been paid can also, right, lead to arrest warrants. So having all of those records and being able to have copies of all of that is really helpful for when you want to begin that naturalization process. And so I just wanted to go over this really briefly. A lot of people in the immigrant community usually ask about the public charge and whether, applying for naturalization applies for public charge. And in this case, we have information up here, but we just want to make sure that we tell everybody that a public charge in this process of naturalization does not apply. And we also just wanted to go over some recent changes from USCIS. So beginning December 12th of last year, there have been now extensions for green cards for people who decide to apply for the naturalization process. And this is for 2 years. So if your green card is about to expire and you apply for the naturalization application, USCIS immediately sends a receipt once you file for the naturalization process that states that you now have an extension for 2 years for you to be able to, sometimes the naturalization process can take a short time, sometimes it could take a longer time. And USCIS just wants to make sure that you're covered with that extension, right, of 2 years in case the process takes longer, in case your green card expires during the process. You want to make sure that you have enough time for all of that. So they're giving the 2-year extensions for people who apply for the naturalization process automatically. And so now, what are some of the exemptions that exist when you apply for the naturalization process? I think something that is really big in the community when helping them around the naturalization process is this section on the English exam, right? So here are the only exemptions that exist for people who are wanting to apply for the naturalization process, specifically towards the English exam. So if someone is 50 years old and has been a legal permanent resident for 20 years, their interview is in their native language. If someone is 55 years old or older and has had their legal permanent residency for 15 years, they are also able to do their interview in their native language. Now, if you're 65 years old or older and you've had your legal permanent residence since 20 years, this is something that's really awesome. You get a shortened interview and it's also in your native language, right? So it's a big significance that helps a lot of our elderly folks, right? A shortened interview, and it's also in their native language. Additionally, another important exemption for the civics portion of the naturalization process is for people who have a physical or mental disability. There is a waiver that usually is filled out beforehand before applying for the naturalization process and is included in the application. Applicants with certain medical conditions can be exempt from taking both the English and civics exams. And so, well, not anybody can just obtain this waiver. The applicant has to, prove, right, that they either have a physical or mental disability that doesn't allow them to take the English and civics exam. Not being literate isn't one of the valid reasons to obtain the form N648. You really do need to have a disability or impairments that must be permanent and that are so severe that the applicant is unable to learn English, history, or civics. And it also cannot be due to a result of illegal drug use. And so how do you really apply for this waiver, right? Let's say you know somebody or you yourself think that this is something that applies to you. The applicant must submit the N648 application along with the N400 application, which is the naturalization application. And they need to submit this form and have it complete and signed by a licensed medical doctor or a clinical psychologist. Or the other right, so clinical psychologist or a licensed medical doctor. The N648 needs to be submitted within the 6 months of the doctor's signature. Additionally, the doctor must be able to clearly describe how the patient's disability or impairments affect the applicant's ability to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of English and civics, right? And so now to the topic, right? How much does this process cost? What does the fee look like, right? So the naturalization process has a filing fee of $725. That's what it is at the moment, but it can change. There are also fee waivers. There are partial fee waivers. There are options to pay with a credit card payment. And there's also an awesome organization called the Mission Asset Fund. And they provide zero interest loans for people who are doing the naturalization process and other types of immigration cases that they're trying to seek for, but specifically in relation to this presentation, they can help out with the zero interest loan for you to be able to pay the filing fee of the $725. So what happens if you can't afford the $725 filing fee, right? If you're currently receiving mean tested benefits by the government, such as food stamps, SSI, Medi-Cal, you can obtain something called a verification of benefits letter, and this is stamped usually by the agency, and they provide you with this document that states the type of benefits that you've had within the last couple of months. And so this letter needs to be submitted within the same month that you submit your application. There's also a fee waiver for if your total household income is below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines. There's also an option for a fee waiver on that. And then rarely do we offer this, but it's also an option is if you have extraordinary economic circumstances, there may be a possibility where you could get an exemption for this, right, to not pay the fee. But we usually only have really seen the first two get approved. But of course, if you have an extraordinary economic circumstance, we would obviously want to do a consultation and speak to you about what that looks like. But that is an option that is available. And so this is what the Health and Human Services Agency verification of benefits looks like. It looks like this. It can also look sometimes a little bit more differently, but basically it has the basics, right? It's stating all of the type of benefits that you're receiving, if there's a fee to it, and all of that good information is the form that we include in the application as evidence that you indeed have benefits, right? And so I spoke about this one a little bit before, but if you can afford the $725 fee, you may be able to qualify for a partial waiver. The total household income has to be greater than 150%, but less than 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. And this is for a partial fee waiver, right? So there's a full fee waiver and then there's a partial fee waiver. And there's also the option of being able to pay with a credit card payment. So now to talk a little bit more about what are the steps, the necessary steps that you need to take in order to apply for the naturalization process. Well, the first thing that you need to do is complete the naturalization application, which is the N-400. You need to be able to submit the N-400 applications. Sometimes this includes pictures, the payment that you will be using to pay for the process, or the evidence and fee waivers. And then once you submit the application, usually after that is when USCIS starts issuing those receipts to your home, right? And so you'll get a notice to go do your fingerprints. You will also lastly get a notice for your interview. And so at your interview, these are the things that usually happen, and that is the officer reviews your N-400 application. You get tested on the civics portion. You have to be able to read a sentence in English, write a sentence in English, right, with the exemption for those that can do it in their native language. These are usually the steps that it takes for you to be able to go through the entire process. Then once you leave your interview, you'll be given a written notice of the outcome of the process by an immigration officer. Once that happens and everything went well, you'll be given a receipt notice or sent a receipt notice to your home regarding your oath ceremony. In special occasions, and as of lately, there have been times where people become and do their oath ceremony the same day of their interview. I hope that continues. It's a really awesome benefit that our clients are able to just go into their interview. If the outcome is positive, then they're able to do their oath ceremony there and then. But that is maybe subject to change. As of now, that's what it looks like. And then you actually, right, they give you an actual certificate of naturalization. Now, the important part here, right, is that we want to make sure you all know that only after receiving your naturalization certificate is when you're actually considered a U.S. citizen. So if you don't have that certificate of naturalization, right, and you went to your interview, that doesn't mean that you're a U.S. citizen. You need to have that certificate in hand that has your name and the date, stating that you are now a naturalized citizen, right? That you've completed the process and that you're a U.S. citizen. So we want to make sure that's clear for all of us here. And so what are some of the benefits of obtaining U.S. citizenship? Well, here are just some of them, right? You have the right to vote, the protection from deportation, the freedom of travel. You're able to obtain a U.S. passport. You're able to hold public office. More government employment opportunities can be open to you, can receive additional public benefits that maybe you weren't able to before. You no longer have to report to USCIS, right? You're now a US citizen. That is no longer something that you have to be doing. You don't have to be renewing anything. It's over with at that point. And you're also able to petition for other family members that maybe before, when you were just a resident, you weren't able to do. And so now to kind of just finalize our portion of our presentation, we always just like to talk to everybody about how to avoid fraud, right? Because unfortunately, our communities tend to be targeted by fraud, right? And so we want to make sure that you all have the tools and knowledge to know how do we avoid fraud. And so here are just some of the tips and strategies that our organization and department likes to give the community so that they know what to do if anything happens, or if you maybe go to an appointment and you don't know or aren't sure if everything went well. We always suggest that you get a recommendation, right? You get recommended, hey, right, our communities tend to have a lot of different connections with people, and so if they can tell you, hey, I know this attorney, or I know this of this organization, right, getting a recommendation. The other really important thing is checking for credentials and for past disciplinary actions that the person that you're going to file, right, any of these immigration cases for, that you're checking for these things. So as a Department of Justice accredited rep, partially myself and Hector, you can find us in the www.justice.gov.EOIR. You'll be able to find our names there listed, right, that we have been accredited. For our attorneys, that are here practicing in California, you can go to www.calbar.ca.gov and check, right, to see if the attorney that you visited is has their credentials and all of that, and see if they have had any past disciplinary actions. So those are things you can look up. So we just want to make sure you all know that, so that you know what to do in case that anything like that surges in a consultation that you go to, or for family members or loved ones that that may have gone through something like this. We also want to make sure that the community is clear of identifying what areas of expertise people practice in, right? An immigration attorney is an immigration attorney, right? They are trained and are able to provide you with the best representation for cases that surround immigration, right? Not all attorneys practice in the same area, and so we want to make sure that we make that distinction with everybody. You want to make sure that you get a written contract, right? Read the contract, make sure you read it thoroughly before signing it. If you do decide to sign, make sure that you obtain a copy of that contract so that you know, right, what you sign, and so that there isn't any misunderstandings, right, during the case. So that's very important. And always getting copies of everything, right, is really important. And so with that, we'll end our presentation here. Thank you so much for joining. Please feel free to call 619-269-1823, extension 426, or shoot us an email at immigration@alliancesd.org for any consultations. If you are interested in the process of naturalization after hearing this, and you would like to schedule an appointment, please call or send us an email, and we'll be more than gladly to provide you with the consultation and tell you if this is something that you can pursue. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.